This is Still Enrolled.
And welcome on into Still Enrolled, a Big Ten football podcast. Thank you for joining us here in what is a loaded, very busy podcast as we have Michigan responding to some cheating allegations. We have Bret Bielema right now teeing off on Twitter, just making some good jokes that we'll dive into here. Which Big Ten coach will be the next to win their first national title after Jim Harbaugh did in 2023 and Ryan Day did in 2024? We'll give you some names of what to look out for. And we have part two of our transfer portal winners and losers. So as you can tell, very, very busy podcast. Fresh off a concert. Two friends, which I was not sure if that was the name of the band or how many people were at the concert. Here he is, Brian Tripp.
So you've never heard of Two Friends?
Maybe a song or two. See, my issue is I know a lot of song names. I have no idea who sings them. So possibly.
Well, they're DJs, so you're off to a really good start.
Oh boy.
So
well, what's the biggest song? Like, what's their most popular song we got here? Let's see if I know.
They have a couple of their own original songs, but they're the ones who create the big booty mixes.
Oh,
have you never
okay.
listened to a big booty mix?
I have, and I can't. This is my problem. I can't say like I know who makes them. Wow. So you went to basically
Matt
a concert.
Eli, two friends that create the big booty mix.
You are a lot cooler than I am. Wow, that's actually very humbling. Basically went to an EDM concert.
This is my third time. This is my third time seeing Two Friends. So I saw the launch of Big Booty Mix 22 in Chicago. Wow. And then went to see them last year at Stage AE in Pittsburgh, which is where I went last night, and then saw them again last night. So their shows, high energy, you can call it EDM. Their shows, they DJ, and they use a lot of the Big Booty Mix in their show. That drives the show, but obviously that's only an hour. So they played for about an hour and a half, and then they'll sprinkle in some of their own original music, which they don't have a ton of, but the stuff's pretty good, some of their original stuff. And then they'll also like pause kind of the Big Booty Mix and maybe like play a full song or a riff. They'll have a saxophone come up on stage, like fire, lights, lasers, confetti. It's fun. It's really fun. I had a great time. Not too much fun though, because I'm here and doing the podcast today, but they have a great show, high energy. If you love music, it's a really enjoyable way to let loose and let your hair down for a night.
If you had any doubts, and I think there's plenty of reason to have doubts if you've been listening to the podcast since you started back in late August, I guess now we can put those doubts to rest. You are cool. We could say you are officially cool.
I can't believe that joke just went right over your thick head.
Let the hair down?
Yeah, I thought that would get a laugh out of you.
I mean, yes, fine. It was okay. But you made a hair joke the other day, like, splitting hairs, and who am I to talk about hair? So I just wasn't sure if that was, you're going back to the wealth, another hair joke, or if this was just more of a, just a common phrase.
If you can't be self-deprecating, like that's the most important thing in having a good sense of humor and being funny and fun is to have that self-deprecation part of it. I think that's a great quality to have. And it's kind of like owning up to it. Like I'm just owning up to, I don't want to say my faults or my flaws. I embrace it. Yeah. Like there was a time, and I started going bald probably 18, 19 years old, but there's a time in college, later on in college, first couple of years out of school. It's like 20 through 25, where I was like hanging on and trying to hang on and like, how do you make it work? And looking back at pictures, I shouldn't have tried to hang on. Like I'm kind of like a real fine bottle of wine. I'm getting better with age. And I've embraced it now. Whereas in the past, I think I was like clinging to it and hopeful. And I tried all sorts of different products and anything that you can do to salvage what was left.
You actually bought some of those scams on TV? Oh, God. Like the hair pieces that are totally not one and the same, but some guys like, oh yeah, 6 months ago, this is what I look like. Now look at me with my Fabio hair. Yeah, it looks real legit. Also, by the way, only you could say, I am self-deprecating, and then 30 seconds later say, hey, I'm like a fine bottle of wine. I age beautifully. You
All
are
right, let's dive into this.
one
Let's
in a
move on.
million. Oh, Brian Tripp. Well, glad you enjoyed the concert. Again,
Thank you.
congratulations for you being cooler than me. Glad it was a good time.
What's
As
the
well.
last concert you've been to?
Oh, God, I'm not a big concert guy. Billy
And I don't
Joel,
know if
like
I'd call
5
it a
years
concert.
ago.
It's kind of like bringing a Vegas nightclub to you. Like that's what the tour is, right?
Getting those. How's your shoulder then? All tied up from the fist pumping?
No, I'm not an Italian New Yorker, Long Island kind of guy.
Oh,
I
my
don't
God.
fist pump. Like all I picture you doing that. You doing that was a straight out of an episode of the Jersey Shore right there. What you just did was straight out of an episode of Jersey Shore.
Did you have like tie-dye on, like highlighter? Were you glowing?
No. And I didn't frat flick either. Like I didn't do the frat flick.
I don't even know what that is. See,
You know what the frat flick is?
So out of touch.
Frat flick.
Frat flick. I didn't even.
That's the frat flick.
I had no idea there's a name for it. Jeez. I feel old just doing that, by the way. Oh my God. Yeah, you are much more. Thank God we have you on the pod. You keep us hip, in tune with what the kids are talking about these days and what concerts they're going to see.
Maybe it's because I'm teaching college classes now and I'm around them all the time.
They keep you young.
It's keeping me young. It keeps you fresh. That is one of the beauties of living in state college. It's so cyclical, and the students come back. It's a young town. It's a vibrant town. Maybe that is the pro. Maybe that's the benefit here of this.
You keep getting older, and they all keep staying the same age.
Let's move on. Let's move. No.
Speaking of what all of the cool kids are talking about,
I'm going to Ann Arbor today. I'm flying to Ann Arbor today. Maybe I could poke around there. Huh? How's that for a transition?
Maybe we'll get Sherrone Moore. See if Sherrone Moore's around. Maybe he can give us some on-the-record comments about some of the allegations here, as Yahoo Sports dropped a big article this week, basically highlighting Michigan's rebuttal of all the allegations from the NCAA that came out a long time ago about the cheating scandal and Connor Stallions. So we got actually some answers, Tripp, in this Yahoo article. So I want to kind of break it down.
Yep.
As well, give you what was found. And we can actually now start to separate a little bit fact from fiction. Where I want to start, though, is this. The initial Michigan statement right away off the bat here was that they basically refute any of the alleged rules violations that the NCAA is accusing them of. They use the words, quote, grossly overreaching and wildly overcharging when talking about the NCAA's allegations towards them. Michigan also said they will not get into a structured settlement with the NCAA. And here's the biggest thing here, Tripp, that I found very interesting. They admitted that basically they stole signs illegally, but they are claiming at least that the sign stealing that they did do led to, and I'm quoting, I should say directly Michigan here, minimal relevance to competition. So since we didn't have a pod last year, let's just quickly dive into, do you buy that last part? Do you think that Michigan, if they did steal signs illegally, that while they are admitting to doing it, that it did not have a big impact on the actual game itself? Do you buy that or no?
Well, did you watch the entire documentary on Netflix?
Unfortunately, yes.
What were your thoughts and impressions? Did you come out of it sympathetic for Connor Stallions?
No, not at all.
What were your impressions?
And to me, in part because he came out as someone who was
arrogant and smug. Yeah.
Yes, who knew what he was doing and basically did the Netflix doc because he thought I'm going to get away with it. So like basically, here's all my secrets. I have no sympathy for him. I don't. And that's part of the reason why I have no sympathy for Michigan with how they've handled this entire thing. They have come out like they are holier than thou, like they've done nothing wrong. They're the victims here. And I do think, at least to answer my own question first, I do think knowing the opponent's signs and getting them illegally has an impact. Like there's like the secrecy, like in terms of what play is being run, is one of the like hallmark things of football. If you know what play is coming offensively or defensively, even if you have less talented players, it makes your job 50 times easier to be able to succeed and get a stop on defense or succeed and make a big play on offense. I think it has a huge impact on these games.
You know, my answer is every school, every team, every program is trying to steal signs. However, there's bounds in which you're allowed and permitted to do it. Like on the sideline, I can tell you from being on sidelines, there are staff members who are watching the other team's signals. And you can try to do it through video. Like it is legal to do it through video, but you can't. The way Michigan obtained the information is highly illegal. and then assuming what they obtained provided them a competitive if you can decipher the signs, if Stalions was able to decipher the signs with his intelligence, right? And if you watch the documentary, the guy's smart. He's got a formula for it. If all that information and signs came from legal sign stealing or legal scout, like that's part of the game, then it's one thing. But I am not naive enough to think that they didn't gain a significant edge in being able to decipher the signs because of the advanced work and the positioning that he or staff members put themselves in. So I don't buy the minimal relevance to competition statement as well. But everyone's doing it. It's how they went about getting it. And then how they went about getting it probably provided them a significant edge in knowing what they were. Now, do you still have to execute and every team's changing plays? Like, I don't know that it's as big of a deal as some may make it out to be, but it is a significant advantage, especially in which the fashion they went about doing it. And we'll still find out what did or didn't happen, or hopefully find out what did or didn't happen.
True.
I have a problem with it, and I disagree with that phrasing, minimal relevance to competition.
So we agree on that. Let's get into some answers then, because obviously that question has been kind of talked about now for a year or so, but a lot of the new information we've gotten now kind of provides some answers. So one of the big questions was, right, Sherrone Moore, it came out that he, or before we get to that, sorry, let's go in order here. First things first, one of the big questions. How did the NCAA find out about this in the first place, right? There's some rumors on the internet that Ryan Day's brother is a private, investigator, and he was the one who tipped off the NCAA. Well, according to this article from Yahoo Sports, and according to documents released by Michigan and the NCAA, who tipped off the NCAA was an inside job. Someone who reportedly used to work at some capacity for Michigan. We don't know when they worked for Michigan. No information has been released right now. But the only information we do know is that at one point, this person was employed by Michigan. Does that bring any more validity, Tripp, to already maybe preconceived notions about this whole thing?
Sure, but it could be a disgruntled staffer that's looking for something.
True. That's fair.
That's what I would assume. It's a disgruntled staffer or someone who has morals and ethics and, that wanted to stand on high ground. But yeah, I don't know where it came from doesn't change much for me.
Okay. That's fair. Here's also what, Michigan acknowledged a little bit later and just kind of piggyback on what we said before. Michigan admitted illegal in-person scouting, but their claim is that it's not as drastic and widespread as the NCAA is indicating. So again, they admit wrongdoing, but they're basically not admitting the volume of wrongdoing that right now is being accused to them. And the other thing here, Tripp, is Sherrone Moore's text messages, right? That was always a big conversation that as soon as this story broke, Sherrone Moore deleted 52 text messages between him and Connor Stalions. Now, Moore's on the record here, and I have a quote I'm going to read for you that is Sherrone Moore on why he deleted the texts. He said, quote, "So I deleted all the information, all Connor, on my personal phone, and it wasn't to hide anything. It was just that I was extremely angry of, the type of person that would do that to this program and these kids," end quote. Do you buy Sherrone Moore's explanation that he deleted his text not because of incriminating evidence, but because he was frustrated that this would take away some attention for a team right now that he thought was obviously at that point on the cusp of going to win a national championship? When's the last time you went through and deleted your text message threads? I have a setting in my phone for space that does the automatic 1 year, but I don't recall a time where outside of the spam, which by the way is just getting out of control. Outside of the spam or like back in the voting days in like November, those political like texts you get, outside of those, never deleted any text with anybody. How about yourself? Same. That answers our question. Okay. And then the last thing here that is interesting, we also learned, Tripp, is remember, that right? One of the quick. But that's a good point, right? Like, no matter, even if it's a crazy X, you're probably just leaving it on there, right? Like, I don't think you're wiping away the entirety. By the way, the day of it comes out, before we even kind of know whether this is actually factual or not, which, by the way, I think should tell you right there if it's factual or not. If you, hour after hearing about this news, oh boy, I got to delete all this stuff. Yeah, I would say that's just not happenstance or a coincidence. And the other thing here, Tripp, right, this got a lot of attention in the doc you mentioned, the Connor Stallions documentary on Netflix. Was he on the Central Michigan sideline on the opening game for Michigan State wearing sunglasses and a Central Michigan hat and shirt? Well, a text message that was unveiled by the NCAA as part of their investigation back in April of 2023 was that a Central Michigan assistant coach, Jake Costner, Stallions texted to Sherrone Moore. He texted that Costner wanted to meet with Moore. And again, now you look ahead, Stallions is on the sideline week number 1. And later the fall, once the investigation and the allegations came out, who did Central Michigan fire in season? One Jake Costner. So now we are starting to get a lot of fill in the blanks here, or a lot of, I should say, fill in the blanks starting to be filled with some information. Connor Stallions, just go back to the doc you mentioned. It felt like there was no denial. And at that point, if you're not denying it, you're admitting it about him on the sideline. I think, again, now we could start to feel like a lot of maybe assumptions, beliefs are now starting to be validated with some concrete evidence here, released again by Yahoo Sports over the last few days.
There's a whole lot of kindling that at some point, right? All it takes is a little spark. Yeah.
So let me ask you this.
I agree with you.
Let me ask you this then. Two questions here. If, right, we're not going to get ourselves in trouble. If Michigan is found guilty of cheating, do you look at their 2023 national championship now any differently than you did before?
Not really. The players still have to go out and play. I would make it akin to kind of the Patriots dynasty, where there's kind of always been those rumors, like what happened. Sure, it may have given them a competitive advantage, and maybe this is like why you cheat in sports. Like USC still won the championship. Michigan still won the championship. The Patriots still won the championship. Whether you want to like take it away, change it. Yeah, I guess it could change how you feel about it a little bit, but they still won the games. I know it's probably an odd answer and not what people typically hear, or in this type of forum, you're supposed to have a hot take as to, yes, this changes everything for me. Certainly makes it, you give it the asterisk, right? Bonds, home run chase, McGuire, Sosa. But it happened. Like, it happened. You're not going to go back and change it. It happened. So, yeah, I guess it kind of, it changed. You view it a little different. But for me, not a ton, honestly. And maybe I'm just so used to it. But think of all the examples I've just given. When you start, it doesn't change it for me. It really, as much as maybe it should, if, and again, this is a huge if, there's a lot of smoke, but
right,
I don't know that it changes a ton for me.
It does for me for a few reasons. Number one, like when you have a competitive advantage in general, it's just hard to respect you. Like, even though when this came out, they haven't played the meat of their schedule. So you would assume when they played Penn State, when they played Ohio State in the Big Ten title game and in the 2 playoff games, they weren't doing what they previously were doing. Mm-hmm. But still, like, I just have a tough time looking at you legitimately when we know that you cheated. And even whether it's for 5 games, whether it's for a few years. And that's also where it goes back to number 2 for me of why I do look at it differently. Michigan, right, brought everyone back after 2022 in part because they were so close. Well, this cheating allegedly goes back to 2021. And so now, like, if it helped them get to where they beat Ohio State 3 years in a row at that point, or at least after 2022, 2 years in a row at that point, and you're close, and there's a belief of, oh man, you know, we're 1 or 2 plays away, let's bring it all back, kind of the way we saw Ohio State do last year and Penn State trying to do this year. Mm-hmm. But if that belief is because you cheated and got an unfair advantage, and maybe if you didn't have the, you know, the signs, maybe you're not going 12-0 the way they did in 2020. Maybe you're losing a game. You know, maybe you're not in the Big Ten title game. Maybe you're not in the playoff overall, and maybe that makes it more difficult for everybody, for Michigan, to come back in 2023 the way they did. Maybe if you're not as close, you don't, you know, get that taste of it. Maybe you say, you know what, I'm out of here. That also to me is why I kind of look at it like, I think it does not just for the national title game, but also the path leading up to it. For me as well, impacts it.
No, I entirely agree with that. I'm just speaking in like retrospect. Yeah, I agree with all of that. How they got there, if they did it that way, that doesn't have a place in the sport. But in retrospect, like, I don't know that you can go back and change. You can't change time. You can't change the results. You can't change the games. They shouldn't have done it. Hopefully, if it did happen, if it happened, they get penalized appropriately for it. But you can't go back and replay the season. So for me,
right,
you know where I'm coming from? Like,
right. No,
it's an interesting
I think your Barry
paradigm.
Bonds. I think your Barry Bonds example is perfect because like Barry Bonds in the record book, right, is the home run king at 762.
But
but it's kind of one of those things like, yeah, but, or like, sure, like you look at it, that's how at least I feel like Michigan is the 2023 national champions. But there's always, to me, like there's always, especially if this is true, it's always going to be, yeah, but, or the unknown of, well, if you didn't have cheating, who knows, what would have been. There's always going to be that, yeah, but. And to the other question I have to kind of wrap this up is, to your point, like if they're found guilty, what do you do? I mean, one of the big things, right, is going to be vacating the title. Yeah. We've seen it in sports. I know. What is it actually going to do if Michigan can't hang a banner in their stadium? Everybody, to your point, witnessed it. Probably also true with their brashness right now towards the NCAA. Is that like, that's where I think the future of the program is in more trouble. Like, there's nothing you can do at this point with how slow the NCAA is. And by the way, this is just coming out now in terms of Michigan's retort to the notice of allegations. We are still, I think, probably at least a year away, maybe from like an actual verdict of guilty or not. Like we've seen plenty of times, the NCAA moves slow as molasses. So it could be 2026, 2027 by the time you get an actual ruling on what happened in 2023, maybe even earlier. Vacating won't do anything. I think the future of the program could be in trouble. I think Sherrone Moore could be in trouble. I think scholars, like that's where I think if you look at punishment, that's the only thing you can possibly do.
I hate to punish. Right? I hate to punish kids that weren't a part of it. Though. Like if Sherrone Moore is involved, yes, punish him, but don't punish the program and the kids and the fans. Like everyone talking about, the same thing goes back to SMU or Penn State. Like those players, those kids, why punish the fans and the kids and their future and limit their opportunities? Like, yeah, if Sherrone Moore's involved, suspend him, punish him with a ban from coaching in the sport, whatever you want, but don't punish the current kids, the fans, because of something none of them had any involvement or awareness of.
Do you have an idea what to do then? Because it is so tough. Because like in one sense, like take Sherrone Moore out of it for a second. Like if you let's just say NCAA says for 2027 Michigan postseason ban. They can't go to the Big Ten title game, can't go to a bowl game, can't compete for the national championship. Like I'll be honest, I'm torn because number one, okay, fine, like Michigan's getting the Michigan overall university program is getting punished for something they did, and rightfully so. But it's also tough because, to your point, well, kids at that point in 2027 have no connection to 2020. Like, why are they getting punished for something that happened 5 years ago? Players and coaches, for the most part, are not outside. Assuming Sherrone Moore's still there, he's maybe the only one that's still there from that 2023 national title team. Why are they getting punished? But at the same time, then I'm like, well, then what do you get? Like, are they just going to get rewarded for cheating? And then what's the going forward here? What's the incentive for schools to do the right thing when, okay, Michigan cheated? Sure, they may get a slap on the wrist publicly, and maybe people don't look at their national title the way they look at everyone else's national championship. But hey, the banner's still up, championship's still there, and they're kind of chugging along outside of some maybe bad PR for a few days. Like that's also the other. You don't discourage cheating if you basically say, well, we can't punish the kids currently, and so here's whatever. We're just going to put a mean notice out that you did it, and that's it. Like I will say the NCAA gets a lot of crap, and I think most times it's rightfully so. This is a tough situation here where it does feel like you are damned if you do and also damned if you don't.
We could ask Bret Bielema his thoughts.
I think the best part is about Bret Bielema is that we don't have to ask him. We know his thoughts. Holy smokes. Talk about having a field day on Twitter. I just want to show you some of the tweets here in case you missed it. Bret Bielema from the last few days. So when the Yahoo Sports article came out a few days ago, This was Bret Bielema's first tweet. He had many tweets here.
What about for our audio audience? How are you gonna, Siri would tell you what those are. Crying face emoji, angel emoji, football, angel emoji, crying face emoji. You gotta, I want to see you do the next one for our.
Okay, let's try to translate this first of all. He's happy, he's laughing at the fact that Michigan, self-proclaimed to be innocent and holier than thou, is now getting in trouble and basically looking hypocritical. Is that fair to say? What in the 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 emojis Bret Bielema used?
I think that was well done.
Let's go. This one's a lot easier for the radio audience here. Jim Harbaugh there was a video of Jim Harbaugh back in his 49er days. And the quote to the video is, "If you cheat to win, then you've already lost." Well, guess who found that video back? And this is probably at least a decade ago. Again, Jim Harbaugh wearing a 49ers hat. Bret Bielema, who decided to quote tweet that tweet a few hours after the first tweet he put out, saying, quote, "Really? Why did you leave? Was looking forward to playing, but understand why you ran to the NFL. See you in the future and can't wait." Man, he's fired up, Tripp. I love this. Like, I love the fact that coaches, number one, are petty. And number two, now are starting to feel okay in their skin. We talked about a lot with James Franklin, right? Kind of felt like after the Ohio State game, he kind of felt more comfortable in being himself when we heard him, whether it was, in press conferences with fans, just how he kind of acted and coached in games. He felt more free and kind of okay to be himself. Bielema was never afraid to be himself, but now he's showing it on social media. I wish more coaches. This is great. This is great.
Look at the bowl game and the interactions with the South Carolina sideline and Shane Beamer. I mean, he's always been a little brash and he's always had a good personality. First of all, I've interviewed him. He's a really nice guy. But I enjoy it. Like, coaches, number one, they're extremely well paid and deservedly so. But they're such a big part of the sport. Like, why not show your person? They're almost these larger than life figures, right? At these universities where they're the figurehead of the football program and ultimately the front door, as football is and athletics is, the front door to any university, the front porch to any university. Yeah, I love it. I think it's great that he's like that. I know some coaches shy away from it because of bulletin board material. I don't know. Like, I've talked to athletes a lot. Bulletin board material is such an interesting thing. We obviously talked a lot about it with Marcus Freeman and the press conference leading up to the Orange Bowl. Like, if you need bulletin board material to get ready to play in the Orange Bowl, to go to the national championship, like, really? I don't know that I buy that. If you're a highly competitive athlete playing a Division I sport, do you really need bulletin board material to get fired up for your games? Like, I love this.
I'm with you. And I think it's a fair assessment. Like, at that point, you're 60 minutes away from the national title game. I don't think you need any more motivation, especially in kind of some innocuous, harmless comments James Franklin made. But either way, Franklin's feeling himself. Bielema's feeling himself. To quote the late, great Billy Mays, but wait, there's more. Bielema did not log off of Twitter. He instead found another Jim Harbaugh video. And the quote to that video was, "Tell the truth always. If you lie, it's over." Bret Bielema doing what he does, either him or a great social media team finds that tweet, quote tweets it, laughing emoji, football, laughing emoji.
I think it's actually crying face emoji. I think.
Oh, you're right. Well, one of those laughing, crying, like maybe you're.
Let me type it into my phone and I'll tell you here, which it is. You got to fill while I do this.
That's true. The laughing, it's kind of one of those, like, you're laughing so hard you're starting to cry sort of things. Like, he can't believe it. That's where I will go with it here. But Bret Bielema getting a good use out of these emojis here. Look, I love the investigative journalism you're doing right now. You're typing on the phone. You're squinting.
Trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure it out.
I think it's laughing. Either way, crying, laughing, crying doesn't. It's all, the message is the same. And that's basically Bret Bielema dancing right now on the grave, if you will, of Jim Harbaugh. Now kind of digging up some old quotes about Jim Harbaugh doing, everything above board and not lying. And now here he is lying, allegedly, about cheating. And then the last one here, which I think is also very funny, nothing to do with Michigan or Jim Harbaugh, but he found this tweet from On3. ESPN gave their 2026 college football playoff predictions for next season. They have, as you could see here, if you're watching, Penn State, the national champs. If you're listening, they had the 12-team bracket. They gave all their teams. In terms of Big Ten teams in the bracket, they have Penn State, they have Michigan, they have Ohio State. Bret Bielema saw that, did not like it, and had 1, 2, 3, 4, the same laughing, crying emojis, followed by 3 sets of eyeballs, followed by 4 more laughing, crying emojis with the hashtag FAMILY, hashtag ILL.
I love
Clearly
that.
not happy his team is not getting love going into a big 2025.
I love that.
With you.
Part of the sport's perception. And if you can advocate for your team and get that perception to help, and obviously preseason rankings matter, right? Like that's all part of the sport. I love it. I love it. And I'm sure the players do too. Like he's a player's coach. And I think that's great. We talked all about those rankings. And, you know, I'm a firm believer there shouldn't be rankings until the first college football playoff rankings come out. You're still going to have your preconceived notions probably going into the year. But I would hold all rankings. I think it's a detriment. Look, it's great for conversation to talk about, but when ultimately it's a subjective ranking system to put teams into a 12-team field in the postseason, like going into Ohio State is always going to get more love than Indiana. It just, that's how it is. That's how it is. It's part of the sport. So I don't blame him.
Also, what I love too is that he's putting himself out there. Like I respect it. Like, because come September, if they lose a game, they shouldn't. Come October, even November, they're sitting there at 8-4, 7-5.
Oh, it's gonna come back.
There's gonna be a lot of people.
Right back.
Jim Harbaugh may log on to Twitter, create an account just to go clown Bret Bielema there.
You better be comfortable in your own skin because it's coming right back at you.
That's right. But I respect it. Like, look, you want to put yourself out there. You obviously, have to perform come 2025. But I respect a guy that feels confident in himself, confident in his team. I'm just like, yeah, I'm putting this out there and put myself out there. We're going to back up the talk and we're going to play well. I love it. One thing that's interesting, Tripp, here that may make their 2025 season a little bit harder and beyond is a big news clip or a big news break we got earlier on Thursday. And that was USC making a big hire off of Illinois staff. They have hired Dre Brown to become their director of player personnel under now Chad Bowen, who's now essentially their GM for USC. There's a connection there. Both worked at Notre Dame. So now you look at, okay, one of a good recruiter, I would say, and a good just player development organizer for Illinois now is gone at USC. When you look at it from the USC perspective first here, Tripp, what does this move signal to you? What does it mean? Is there a big takeaway at all? Is now USC is kind of bolstering, for lack of a better term, in college football, their front office?
Yeah, I think it's showing that USC's made the investment to go and poach from a big-time program like Notre Dame to go get a guy like Chad Bowden. We talked about it the other day really, really briefly on the podcast on Monday. So I think for USC, it's now him assembling his staff, and they obviously have the resources to go within conference or with among their peers in the case of Notre Dame and be able to get these personnel people to move into similar roles at an institution like USC. I think that's a great work by Lincoln Riley and his program, recognizing what the future of college football is. If you don't have a GM, you got to get one. And then what's that staff look like? Because there's so much. You have the player identification, development, but now, okay, how are we going to work within our salary constraint, for lack of a better word, to finance, like, who's going to get what? How do we distribute that money? And that's where, or how do we attract a player? If X school is offering this versus this school offering that, what can we do to create the space? It's free agency, honestly. Recruiting is becoming free agency when you have guaranteed money to work with, which will be about $20.5 million for this first year.
And why this is such a big get for USC and a big loss for Illinois is you look at Dre Brown's history so far, and especially, again, working under Bowden, both were at Notre Dame. When they were there from 2021 to 2023, Notre Dame 3 is a top 12 recruiting class. And you look at now, he came to Illinois back in April of 2024, so it didn't have a much impact on the 2024 class and even a little bit of 2025. But you look what he had in 2026, kind of already brewing looking ahead. Illinois had, right now at least, a top 25 ranked recruiting class. I know it's early, but still, when you look at where they finished in 2025 at 44, that's a pretty good jump for Illinois if you can have a top 25 class, already starting to be in the works. Now that takes a hit because you lose Brown again going to USC. One thing, Tripp, that I wonder how much an impact will have for the Trojans is just like how much is USC's struggles recently talent acquisition versus coaching? Like, I would argue USC's had enough talent to compete. The problem has just been the development and the coaching. And while, again, you're not going to stick up your nose at someone of this talent with Brown and his talent identification skills. But I think for USC to get to where they want to go, which is college football playoff contention and national title contention, I think they still need more help coaching. I think the bigger question is with Lincoln Riley and his development versus, do they do a good enough job at getting talent into Southern Cal?
It's interesting because I feel like coaching, obviously important, and maybe it stems from program development, off season, like all those things the coach is very involved with. But ultimately, any sport, college football included, obviously, it comes down to who are the Jimmies and Joes, right? So at what point, I think coaching can make a difference when you're at a level playing field personnel-wise. And for how many games they've lost, maybe they aren't at a level playing field personnel-wise. So, I see where you're coming from. They certainly have attracted a lot of talent. They've recruited incredibly well. It's LA, it's California. It's the Big Ten. The Big Ten's a change for them, right? It's a different brand of football week in and week out. And the travel, we saw how the travel impacted USC and Washington and UCLA. Didn't affect Oregon because they're so darn good. But we saw how it affected them throughout the year. I still ultimately, it comes down to the personnel more than the coach. I think we've watched games and have seen where Lincoln Riley could have been better, right? As a play caller, as a game manager. But when you're losing 5-6 games a year, there's more going on than just the coach there. I don't know. I have a hard time. It ultimately comes down to the players. And when you're losing that many games, maybe it is a personnel thing or identifying maybe not the stars, right? But are they the right players to fit? Do you have the right depth at the right positions? That type of thing for USC, especially at the line of scrimmage now, joining the Big Ten. That to me is probably still the number one thing with their roster.
And maybe that's where we see the biggest difference because you look at it, right? Bowden coming from Notre Dame and now Dre Brown, coming from Illinois, right? Both Midwest Big Ten roots. Maybe it is kind of like you said, this is with the idea of we got the skill talent on lock and Lincoln Riley can attract any quarterback and receiver, but now we got to buff up the offensive defensive lines. These guys know how to do it at Notre Dame, at Illinois. They know what a rough and tough Midwest football team looks like and how to build one to compete with them. Maybe that's the motivation now. So if that's the case, very good job by USC kind of maybe identifying a fault in year number one of the Big Ten and now trying to build their team, maybe let's say more in the eye of Oregon, where they're fast still. They got some flash, but they got toughness up front as well, and they can kind of go toe-to-toe with you as well. So very good additions for USC. Obviously a tough loss there for Illinois, but still 2025 should be good for them.
I'm going to go out on a limb. You're not going to say Lincoln Riley as the answer to our next question that we're posing today.
Oh, nice little tease. So as you just said, we've seen now back-to-back years, Big Ten coaches win their first national championship. Jim Harbaugh did it. Ryan Day did it. So now the question is, all right, who's next? It doesn't have to be this year in 2025, but Tripp, which Big Ten coach would you say will be the next to win their first championship in college football?
Yeah, it's a debate of whether you think Dan Lanning is going to get Oregon back to the playoff next year with all the turnover that they had. I know the bracket you threw up earlier did not have Oregon projected to be on it. And if you think Penn State's going to win the national championship in 2025, it's between Dan Lanning and James Franklin. Both programs are ascending. Both programs have the resources, finances, the support that they need. I think Penn State probably has a better roster for 2025. Everyone's talked about what they return. And if you truly believe that model that Michigan and Ohio State have used the last 2 years and Penn State can get over that hump and win a huge game at the end of the year, the answer is James Franklin. You have to feel like they're going to have a shot at this thing in 2025. And because of all the resources and everything we've talked about with Penn State and Knowles the last couple of podcasts, you have to think it's them. And if it doesn't happen in 2025, they're probably not going anywhere for a long time. So, yeah, I think it's an A or a B. And for me, I'm going with Franklin.
I'm with you. Like I said, I just think right now the roster is better than Oregon. I think they have the better chance in 2025. And it does feel like with how, the Big Ten is looking, it does feel like we could see a third straight year of a Big Ten team winning a national title. And look, we just showed you the ESPN predictions before with Penn State winning. I don't think and that was even before I believe they added Jim Knowles. So like, I don't think like that a lot of the hype right now that's been around Penn State with all they're returning for 2025, I don't think it's fraudulent. I think it's legit. I'm with you. I think it is between those two coaches. I think James Franklin has the edge in 2025. So I'm with you. That's why I'll go Franklin here as well. But outside of that, we also had a few other questions we wanted to get into, Tripp, because obviously, right, that's just for right now, that question kind of surrounds two coaches. Is it Lanning or is it Franklin?
Can I interject for a minute, though?
Sure.
You mentioned
please.
Knowles. I had an opportunity to talk to him the other day. So there's a video. I don't think it's come out yet, but I had a 10-minute one-on-one with him that's going to come out from the Penn State football account. So I had an opportunity to talk to him the other day. I think it's the only interview he's done since he's been here so far. He might have been doing one. I think he was doing one this afternoon with Michael Motti. Yeah, I think he was doing one this afternoon with Michael Motti, which would be really interesting. But I had a chance to talk to him, and I'll tell you, like, just first of all, real nice guy, super low key demeanor, kind of just strolling around. You can tell he's a football guy. He just wants to be. He's there to coach football. I think there's a lot of things that will resonate with the fans in the conversation, and hopefully, once that's posted, we can steal some of it and share it.
Yeah, of course,
on our podcast. Stuff that will really resonate with the fans about growing up in Philly, Northeast Philly, and watching Penn State. Talked about reading Joe Paterno's coaching book. But ultimately just kind of a low key, you can tell he wants to get in there. He's been described as that like evil genius kind of in some of the interviews with Ohio State players. And you can tell like he's just a real smart guy, wants to coach football, but he was in the building this week. Most of the coaches were out recruiting. I know he's made some calls for recruiting as well, but most of the coaches were out recruiting, but had a chance to talk to him and was really, really impressed. And you can see that his goal, you can tell he operates in the element of, I'm going to elevate what we have. There's a lot of really good, like it was very complimentary of every coach, coordinator, era of Penn State football, but like truly had this quiet self-confidence in himself. Like, but I can make this a national championship, help make this a national championship team. And I think that's what someone will get when they watch it. And I don't know what they'll do in editing with it, but when someone watches it, they'll kind of get that takeaway from it.
I'm excited for it. Yeah, like I said, once it's released, we'll definitely play some here on the podcast. So you can take a listen to not only Tripp do a great interview, but also Jim Knowles and his philosophy and what he now brings from Columbus to State College as well. So that's why part of the reason should already be subscribed wherever you do get your pods and on YouTube, but that's now part of the reason to do it as well. If you haven't, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, wherever you do get your pods. Again, Still Enrolled is the name, easy to find wherever you are consume media. That's where we are as well. So check it out. We will get you that very shortly here, hopefully by Monday's pod, assuming it is released. Fingers crossed. That is the goal. But we'll keep you updated on that. Back to questions about coaches, Tripp, right? Outside of just who's the next to win their first national title, we also had a few questions here just about different coaches that I kind of want to hit on in the Big Ten as well. First and foremost, we just talked about Dan Lanning here. Would you say, Tripp, yes or no, Dan Lanning wins a national title at Oregon within the next 3 years?
Yes. That's a great question. But yeah, there's no reason to think otherwise, that they're not going to have an opportunity to do it within. You start looking at programs that are built that are going to be there consistently. And it's Ohio State in the Big Ten, but you can go across the country, but in the Big Ten, particularly the best conference in college football, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon are probably, I don't know if I'd put anyone else in that group right now. I think there's some on the precipice of it. But if you're in that group, in that conversation, so any of those schools I'd put in it for the next 3 years, actually. So obviously I'll put Dan Lanning in that group.
I would as well. I think there is one big thing. He does have to get over the hump in terms of winning a big game, if you want to call it that. He beat Ohio State, but there's been, whether it's losing to Washington as a member of the Pac-12, the Oregon last year, whether it's losing to Ohio State in the fashion they did this year. I'm with you. I think Lanning will, and they'll always have one of the top probably 3 to 5 rosters every year in college football for the foreseeable future. I'm with you. I think they break through here pretty soon, get a national title in Eugene within the next 3 years. How about Sherrone Moore? Talked a lot about Michigan. If I told you, Tripp, within the next decade, will Michigan and Sherrone Moore win a national title? Your answer to that would be what?
I think Michigan will have an opportunity to. I'm not sure if that'll be the guy at the helm of it, though. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of noise right now. And based on what we saw this year, again, strong finish. I don't know that there's enough proof to say that Sherrone Moore's the guy for the next decade yet. And there's a lot going on. So that one, I'm actually going to go with no.
I would agree. We gave him a long runway of a decade, but I'm with so much right now over the program. And again, we talked about before what punishments could happen. If they do institute a punishment, even if it's for a year bowl ban, like how does it impact recruiting for the next few years? Like will he even be there? There's too many questions, not enough answers right now on the trajectory of the program. I would agree. I would say no in terms of Michigan, Sherrone Moore getting a national title in the next decade. How about Nebraska? We talked about their transfer portal acquisitions on Monday's pod. If you missed it, we broke down half the Big Ten winners or losers in the transfer portal. Nebraska is a team we called a winner. Matt Rhule, if I told you, Tripp, he will get to a Big Ten title game within the next 5 years, would you say yes or no? Man, not even winning it, just get there.
That's a really good question. If you see what he's done at his other stops, I know you have it listed here on the sheet, so I'll just read it off. Temple, year 3, 10-4, AAC championship, lost. Baylor, 11-3 in his third year, Big 12 championship loss. I do believe he has Nebraska going in the right direction. I don't think they have enough talent to beat. There's so many top teams in the league, in an 18-team league. If it was the old East-West model, yes, I would say absolutely Nebraska would be there. In the current model, now again, scheduling imbalances, all that things like that all plays a factor in it. But without really diving into the schedule for next year and the years after, no, I think there's too many. I think between the teams that we've talked about, I don't see them being able to be sustained and consistently good enough to get to 11, 12 wins in a regular season. In league, getting to 8, 9 conference, you're going to have to win you're probably going to have to win 8 or 9 conference games to have a chance to be in the championship. I don't think they're there in the next 5. I think he's going to do a really good job and get them back into the national scene. Like they could still make a playoff and not be in a Big Ten championship. So I'm going to go with no. And I didn't mean to make that face before. It's not something we'll discuss on our podcast. I was just reading on social media the breaking news about Justin Tucker, whether it's true or not. But the allegation is there. So that's why I made the face before. It wasn't something you said. You'll read it after we're done with the pod. Read it after we're done with the pod. Read it when we're done with the pod. We're almost done. So wait till after the pod to read it.
I will say yes to that question. I think they do break through again, just getting there, not winning it, but I think they can get there. You highlighted, he has done a good job of, especially in year 3, propelling that program. I don't think he's going anywhere unlike Baylor and Temple. I think he'll be in Nebraska for the foreseeable future. So he'll have time. We don't know the schedules going forward, but we saw with Indiana. Indiana was one Penn State loss away from making the Big Ten title game. If you get a good schedule break, and it's a big if, and you have no idea what 2026, 7, 8 schedules look like for Nebraska. But I'm gonna bet that they get a favorable draw in one of those 5 years, and we're sitting there looking at like a 10-2 Nebraska team in the Big Ten title game. Just making it to Indy. I will say yes. Matt Rhule gets in there in the next 5 years. We've talked a lot of these two teams today, Tripp. Illinois, USC. Who makes the playoff first?
Illinois. I think they make it this year.
I agree, actually. Wow, we are in a lock. I think
we talked about their schedule, right? Favorable schedule. I think Illinois is kind of that Indiana. I'm not saying they're going to make a run at it, but I think that answers Illinois. Let's look at their 2025 schedule real quick. Let me just read it off to you. Obviously, the huge one at Indiana to start. Right. Home against USC, at Purdue, home against Ohio State, at Washington, Rutgers, Maryland, Wisconsin. Don't play Penn State, don't play Oregon, and don't play Michigan.
So I believe, too, you said some of their biggest games are at home, right? Or almost all of them?
USC and Ohio State are both at home. Their toughest road game is at Indiana. So, yeah, I mean, maybe their toughest road game's at Washington, in the way too early Still Enrolled podcast preview rankings for next year.
You love doing?
Have Washington in front of Indiana. I'm kind of I get why Bret Bielema is all in on this team. I think that, and a lot of things, again, all it comes down to is your schedule. I don't want to say all, but really a lot of it comes down to what your schedule is. If you're in the shoes of an Illinois, for all the talk about Penn State for 2025, and rightfully so, right? They have to go to Columbus. They get Oregon at home. That's a hard schedule. They have Iowa on a trip to Iowa City on the schedule, Indiana on the schedule, Nebraska on the schedule. It's a little bit different for them. But yeah, I think Illinois makes it next year. I do. I'm bullish on the Illini right now. Maybe
So
Brett's
am
got
I.
me believing.
Two things I'll say really fast. Number one, I thought they did a great job last year of winning the games they're supposed to
Yes.
win. Look at the 3 losses against the 3 best teams in their schedule. Again, you got to break through and get one of those. Maybe a USC win at home can kind of count as that. This is stupid. I hate that I'm going to mention this, but you say perception a lot in this pod. And I think, fair or not, that will help. I do think the win over South Carolina in the bowl game could help with some perception of Illinois. Of everyone was so high on South Carolina. Oh, they should make the playoff. I saw a tweet that they should be in the playoff over Ohio State. And for Illinois to beat them, I get it. Look, it's a bowl game. Who cares? Both teams had some opt-outs. As stupid as it is, I think it does for 2025 help the perception a little bit more of, oh, that's just not Illinois. But okay, that's a pretty good Illinois team. And I think if you start to think like that already, maybe then again, you look at their resume, it looks a little bit better here as the playoff field starts to shape up. All right, we'll end the pod with 2 more questions here. Number 1, will Curt Cignetti get IU back to the playoff within the next 5 years, Tripp? Yes or no?
Really have no reason to doubt him, but it's going to be awfully hard. Still Indiana, right? I think the perception of them changed, but I thought a lot went their way this year too.
Great schedule. The fact that they brought in all the transfers and they hit immediately. Got good injury luck for the most part as well. With all that said, I will say I think Curt Cignetti is a good coach. I'll say yes. I trust him to that he'll restack the roster, that he'll get a win or 2 against maybe a more difficult schedule going forward. Within the next 5 years to make a 12, which, by the way, I should have probably maybe prefaced this before.
And with his age, he doesn't seem like a flight risk. Like another competitive, I'm not saying playoff season, but he doesn't seem like, all right, I'm just using this to get to my next job. Kind of seems locked in there. The new contract, right? Like, I'm not saying they're going back to the basement of the Big Ten. I think they'll be incredibly competitive, 8, 9, 10 wins, no doubt. But it's still hard to make a 12-team playoff. Still hard to make a 12-team playoff. So
does your answer change if I say that maybe the playoff format possibly changes, which you don't know, but there's been rumors of a 14-team playoff and automatic.
Yes, my answer would change then. My answer would change.
That is also, I will say, part of my reasoning for yes is just the uncertainty of we're not going down.
You're bending
only be going up. Yeah, fine. Yeah, I'm just maybe saying maybe we're not locked into a 12-team playoff. That's fine. I did bend the rules here and didn't tell you about it. My apologies. Last one here. Will Jedd Fisch get Washington to a playoff appearance before Kirk Ferentz at Iowa? What do you say to that?
I'd like.
You were just bullish on Washington.
I'm gonna go yes. Yeah,
I would agree as well. I know Iowa can consistently win 8, 9, 10 games a year. It does feel like there's a ceiling, and when it comes to beating good teams now, I don't think at 10-2 with no good wins in their resume that they'll be in most playoff fields. It feels like the ceiling with what Jedd Fisch is building at Washington is better. Now, one thing that could hurt my answer is kind of what you just said before. Unlike Cignetti, I would agree with you. I think he's at Indiana. This is his last job. Who knows with Jedd Fisch? You get some good success. He could jump and use Washington as a leap pad for an NFL. I mean, he's got NFL connections. Like, I don't know. So that's a risk where Kirk Ferentz is, we'll see when he retires, right? But he's not leaving Iowa for anywhere else. I will say yes, Fisch gets Washington to the playoff before Iowa.
Now, we originally were going to end the podcast with our transfer portal winners, losers, uncertainties, the 9 schools we didn't do on Monday. We're already at 55 minutes. What do you I think we save that with all the Michigan talk. Let's say apologize. I know there's probably a bunch of people tuning in waiting to hear our thoughts on the portal and these schools. I do think it's beneficial because I actually researching for it learned a lot, like who's where, because there's so much going on over the last month and a half that we talked about. But let's save that. What do you think? Save it for Monday. Is that fair?
Save it for Monday. And hopefully along with the transfer portal, rankings and discussions about Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, et cetera, Michigan State, hopefully we'll get your interview with Jim Knowles here as well for the people to watch and listen. So that'll do it. Again, make sure you're subscribing on YouTube. Make sure you are subscribing wherever you get your podcast. It's free. It helps us out more than it really helps you out. Be very much appreciated. Always do appreciate your support. With that said, have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week right here on the Still Enrolled podcast.